Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and let me begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the traditional unceded lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm pleased to join the debate today as we progress to the second reading of Bill C-283 regarding addiction treatment in penitentiaries. I want to thank the member for Kelowna Lake Country for her advocacy on this important issue and her hard work. As the member has noted, this bill aims to expand sentencing options to help address the root causes of criminal offending through treatment. Madam Speaker, our government is committed to protecting the health and safety of all Canadians, including those who are incarcerated and struggling with substance abuse issues. As my colleagues will agree, these issues cannot be addressed in isolation. Substance use is a social and health issue that intersects clearly with systemic racism and inequities. Madam Speaker, that's why I'd like to focus on today. The Minister of Public Safety's December 2021 mandate letter reaffirmed the requirement to continue to combat systemic racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system. This includes supporting work to address systemic racism and the overrepresentation of Black, Indigenous, and racialized Canadians within the criminal justice system. The Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada introduced Bill C-5, which was passed last December, an act to amend the Criminal Code and the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. It received royal assent, and we're hopeful that it'll make a significant impact in our criminal justice system in addressing these issues. C-5 aims to restore judicial discretion to impose fit sentences and to address over-incarceration rates amongst Indigenous and Black persons and members of marginalized communities who are overrepresented among those convicted of certain drug and firearm-related offenses. Harms related to substance use are treated as a health and social issue rather than a criminal one. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety, in concert with the provincial and territorial colleagues, addressed many of these important matters head-on at recent meetings of ministers responsible for justice and public safety. Work is underway to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act across the country and within provincial and territorial jurisdictions. Excellent collaboration continues with the FPT Working Group on the development of the Indigenous Justice Strategy and in addressing systemic discrimination and overrepresentation of Indigenous persons within the criminal justice system. The ministers also affirmed, in light of the James Smith Cree Nation tragedy last year, the need to work with Indigenous leaders to ensure their communities are safe and supported. And the ministers agreed to collaborate on the development and implementation of the Black Canadian Justice Strategy to address anti-Black racism and discrimination within Canada's policing and criminal justice system. Another key priority was the ongoing opioid crisis. Again, substance use is a public health issue that must be balanced with public safety. In practice, that means diverting individuals away from the criminal justice system at an early stage through rehabilitative and treatment programs or increased use of conditional sentences. As you can see, Madam Speaker, our government is very much seized with the work to both build safer communities and help break the cycle of substance-related harms by addressing the root causes of criminality. On its surface, Bill C-283 appears to have the same goals. It proposes to offer offenders the possibility of serving all or part of their sentences in a designated addiction treatment facility. But let's examine some of this bill's unfortunate oversights and exceptions. Section 743.11 of the bill would stipulate that those whose offense carries a maximum penalty of 14 years imprisonment or life in prison, and those who have committed an offense resulting in bodily harm or involving a weapon or drug trafficking or production would not be eligible to serve their sentence in a designated addiction treatment facility. Madam Speaker, this is a problem. With respect to overrepresentation, Bill C-283 runs counter to our goals. We know that Indigenous and Black persons are overrepresented in the federal penitentiaries. According to the data, over 68% of Indigenous women in custody are serving a federal sentence of more than 10 years. and black offenders represent the largest proportion, 42%, of offenders convicted of importing or exporting drugs. Overall, black and Indigenous persons tend to be subject to longer sentences, and I invite members opposite to look at the Auditor General's report on our corrections that talked about systemic racism, which was released late last year. It is therefore clear that Bill C-283 would exclude some of the most vulnerable and overrepresented members of the custody population, those who, in fact, may be most directly in need of the treatment and rehabilitation. In addition, paragraph 743.111 sub-A of the bill would require the offender to show evidence of repeated good behavior in order to indicate substance use has contributed to their actions. Here's yet another barrier to accessing treatment for incarcerated people. Not everyone who needs support and services may have a history or pattern of behavior. For example, those who have only recently begun using opioids. This could also represent a prohibitively expensive burden for offenders who do not have the means to provide submissions establishing their history or repeated behavior. Bill C-83 would therefore not only make those individuals ineligible for treatment through no fault of their own, but would also create significant issues of inequity within BIPOC and social economically disadvantaged offenders potentially being denied services at a disproportionate rate. This bill flies in the face of the Minister of Public Safety's December 2021 mandate letter, which reaffirmed the need to continue to combat systemic racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system. It also misaligns with Correctional Services Canada's commitment to addressing the over-incarceration of Indigenous peoples. Again, that's why our government introduced Bill C-5 to treat harms related to substance use as a health and social issue, not a criminal one. Ultimately, the measures in Bill C-5 will help address over-incarceration rates amongst Indigenous and racialized persons convicted of certain drug and firearm-related offenses. In contrast, Bill C-83 would undermine these goals. Despite its veneer of concern for the health and safety of offenders who use substances, this bill is not designed to help those who need it the most. I encourage all members to join me in voicing their concern about this bill, Madam Speaker. Thank you.